I watched my boss pour another whiskey at 2 p.m. as he announced to the board that his revolutionary algorithm had just generated another million in profits. The same algorithm I'd coded in my basement, the one that was single-handedly keeping this dying firm alive. What he didn't know was that buried deep in those thousands of lines of code was a little surprise I'd installed months ago, a digital time bomb that would turn his greatest triumph into his most spectacular downfall. All it needed was one click. My name is David Brooks, and at 34, I had mastered the art of being invisible. Thick-rimmed glasses, rumpled shirts, and a corner office so small you could touch both walls with your arms stretched out. For 6 years at Meridian Capital, I'd been the guy who made sense of numbers while everyone else made excuses. Well, everyone except my boss, Richard Hartwell. The man had a talent for turning other people's work into his own success stories. At 52, Hartwell possessed exactly two skills: charming clients, over expensive lunches, and finding the bottom of a whiskey bottle before most people finish their morning coffee. His corner office was 3 times the size of mine, complete with a fully stocked bar that got more use than his computer. But here's what nobody knew about me. Every Tuesday and Thursday night, I disappeared into underground poker games across the city. Weekend mornings found me analyzing sports statistics with the precision of a surgeon, placing bets that hadn't lost me money in over 3 years. My mathematical mind wasn't just built for accounting spreadsheets and tax forms. Makes sense, right? The same brain that could spot a bluffer across a poker table could definitely identify patterns in market data. Meridian Capital was hemorrhaging clients faster than Hartwell could replace his empty bottles. We'd gone from a respectable mid-tier investment firm to the place where careers came to die slowly. Our competitors were eating our lunch, dinner, and probably our breakfast too. The writing was on the wall, written in red ink. Then came that late October evening when everything changed. Most of the office had cleared out by 6, leaving behind the usual suspects: empty coffee cups, forgotten jackets, and me. I was deep in the numbers, analyzing our trading losses from the past quarter, when something clicked. The patterns weren't random at all. They were predictable, like a poker player who always touched his collar when he bluffed. And the weird part is, I realized I could do better. Much better. Years of reading opponents across felt tables had taught me something our fancy algorithms missed entirely: market psychology. Numbers told you what happened, but understanding human nature told you what would happen next. Every trader, every fund manager, every investor had tells just like poker players. The next morning, I knocked on Hartwell's door with a proposal that would either launch my career or end it. "I want to build us a trading algorithm," I told him, watching his bloodshot eyes try to focus on the projection sheets I'd prepared. Something completely different from what everyone else is using. Hartwell squinted at my numbers like they were written in ancient Greek, which, considering his current state, they might as well have been. "Brooks, we don't have money for fancy tech projects. This won't cost anything but time. My time." I slid the profit projections across his desk. "But I want 15% of whatever it generates, plus full credit when it works." That got his attention. Greed has a way of cutting through even the thickest alcohol fog. 15%? He leaned back in his leather chair, the kind that costs more than most people's cars. "That's generous of you to offer me such a deal." 15% for me, I clarified, plus recognition as the system's creator. For a moment, something resembling sobriety flickered in his eyes. He studied the projections again, probably calculating how much glory he could claim if this actually worked. Finally, he extended his hand across the desk. "Deal, Brooks. But this better work, or you'll be updating your resume." We shook hands, and I walked back to my cramped office with a secret smile. That night, I began coding what would become either my greatest triumph or my most elaborate revenge. Funny how those two things sometimes look exactly the same from the beginning. Little did I know which direction fate had chosen. I named my creation Pythia after the oracle at Delphi. Seemed fitting for something designed to predict the future of markets. What I didn't expect was how quickly the future would arrive. The first 3 months were like watching a magic trick in slow motion. I'd start Pythia with a modest portfolio, just enough to test whether my theories about market psychology would actually work outside of a poker game. Every morning, I'd check the overnight results with the same nervous energy I used to feel before revealing a winning hand. But this wasn't luck. This was pure, calculated precision. Pythia didn't just analyze numbers like every other trading algorithm on the market. Anyone with a computer science degree could build something that crunched historical data and spit out predictions. What made my system different was the psychological layer I'd built into its core. All those nights reading poker faces had taught me something Wall Street consistently ignored. Markets aren't driven by logic. They're driven by fear, greed, and the predictable ways people react under pressure. Every successful trade felt like calling someone's bluff at exactly the right moment. Hartwell started paying attention around month 4. Hard to ignore consistent profits when you're used to explaining consistent losses to angry clients. He'd stumble into my office most afternoons, usually carrying his coffee mug that definitely didn't contain coffee, squinting at my computer screen like he was trying to decode hieroglyphics. "Brooks, what exactly is this thing doing?" he asked one Tuesday, swaying slightly despite the early hour. "Reading the room," I told him, which was both completely accurate and totally meaningless to someone who'd never sat across from a professional poker player holding a weak hand. Then, something interesting happened. Hartwell sobered up just enough to realize we might actually have something special here. Within 6 months, he'd authorized me to scale up Pythia's operations. More capital, bigger positions, higher stakes. That's when things got really exciting. The algorithm I'd coded in my basement was now managing millions of dollars. Every day brought new opportunities for Pythia to demonstrate what happened when you combined mathematical precision with an understanding of human nature. Market inefficiencies that other systems missed completely became obvious when you knew what to look for. Like spotting a tell in a high-stakes game, once you saw the pattern, you couldn't unsee it. Over the next 2 years, Pythia transformed from my secret project into Meridian Capital's not-so-secret weapon. The numbers were impossible to ignore. 40% of our firm's profits were flowing directly from my algorithm. We went from hemorrhaging clients to having a waiting list of investors who wanted in on whatever magic we'd discovered. But here's where the story takes a turn that even I didn't see coming. Success, as it turns out, has a way of revealing people's true character. While I was working 16-hour days refining Pythia's code and monitoring its performance, Hartwell was busy rewriting history. Client meetings suddenly featured him as the visionary genius who developed our revolutionary trading system. Industry publications quoted him describing his innovative approach to algorithmic trading. My name never appeared in any of these stories. Let me paint you a picture of how these conversations went. Hartwell would sit in his oversized leather chair, gesturing with whatever glass happened to be in his hand, explaining to potential investors how his years of market experience had led him to develop a completely new approach to automated trading. He'd use words like proprietary methodology and cutting-edge innovation, while I sat 3 floors below, debugging code and wondering if anyone would ever know who actually built the thing keeping our lights on. The promised bonuses never materialized. While other employees received promotions and raises thanks to our improved performance, my corner office stayed exactly the same size. My salary remained frozen at pre-Pythia levels. Every request for a meeting with Hartwell got postponed, canceled, or forgotten entirely. Finally, I cornered him after a particularly successful quarter, where Pythia had generated over $2 million in profits. "We need to talk about my compensation," I said, standing in his doorway, while he poured what had to be his fourth drink of the day. "Brooks, you're already well compensated for your contributions." He didn't even look up from his glass. "You should be grateful for the opportunity to contribute to something bigger than yourself." The words hit me like a cold deck to the face. My contributions? Richard, I built that system. Every line of code, every algorithm, every decision tree. "You crunch numbers," he said, finally meeting my eyes with a look that could freeze whiskey. "I create strategy. The algorithm wouldn't exist without my vision and leadership. You're just a numbers guy." Just a numbers guy. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at Pythia's source code on my personal computer. Thousands of lines of elegant mathematics and psychological insight, reduced to number crunching by a man who couldn't spell algorithm without spell check. The same man who was taking credit for saving Meridian Capital while I remained invisible in my corner office. Then I remembered something interesting about Pythia's architecture. When I'd originally built the system, I'd included several safeguard protocols, emergency procedures that could alter the algorithm's behavior if something went wrong. Think of them as circuit breakers designed to prevent catastrophic losses. Every responsible programmer builds in safeguards. What I hadn't mentioned to anyone was how easily those safeguards could be repurposed. The same code that could protect against disaster could also create it if you knew which switches to flip. And since I was the only person who actually understood how Pythia worked beneath the surface, I was the only one who would know how to flip them. That realization sparked something cold and calculating in my chest. The same feeling I used to get when I realized my poker opponent had just walked into a trap they'd never see coming. Hartwell wanted to take credit for my work? Fine. Let him take credit for all of it. The next morning, I began working on what you might call Pythia 2.0. Same elegant interface, same impressive monthly reports, same consistent profits that kept Hartwell confident and careless. But underneath, I was building something entirely different. Something that would demonstrate the difference between creating strategy and crunching numbers. All it would take was patience and perfect timing. Two skills I'd mastered years ago at poker tables across the city. Hartwell thought he was playing chess while I arranged the pieces for checkmate. He just didn't know the game had already started. Revenge, I discovered, requires the same patience as a perfect poker hand. You don't rush the bluff. You wait for exactly the right moment when your opponent is most confident, most exposed, most convinced they're winning. Building my trap took 3 months of meticulous planning. First, I quietly established Cassandra Capital, using every dollar I'd saved from my underground poker winnings. The irony wasn't lost on me, naming my hedge fund after the profit no one believed, while Hartwell claimed credit for predictions that were actually mine. While he stumbled through interviews about his revolutionary algorithm, I was having coffee meetings with potential investors, carefully demonstrating my market insights without mentioning Pythia. These weren't random conversations. Every potential client I approached had one thing in common. They'd made money from Meridian's recent success. They just didn't know who was really responsible for it. Meanwhile, deep inside Pythia's code, I began activating those dormant protocols I'd mentioned. Remember those safeguards I'd built? Well, turns out the same code that prevents disasters can create them if you flip the right switches. The beauty was in the subtlety. Pythia would continue generating impressive monthly reports, while secretly building toward catastrophic positions. Think of it as constructing the world's most sophisticated house of cards, except only I knew where the structural weaknesses were hidden. The modified algorithm started making increasingly aggressive trades that looked brilliant on paper. Short-term profits appeared healthy, even impressive. But underneath, I was essentially building a massive, mathematically precise time bomb. Every trade that showed profit in the weekly reports was actually part of a larger position designed to collapse at exactly the moment I chose. Hartwell, naturally, took this as confirmation of his genius. "Brooks, Whatever tweaks you've made to my system are working beautifully, he told me one afternoon, gesturing with his ever-present glass. Maybe you're finally understanding the vision I laid out. His system. His vision. The man couldn't spell algorithm without autocorrect, but sure, it was definitely his vision. The best part was watching him get greedier. Success breeds recklessness, especially in people who don't understand what's actually creating their success. Hartwell began leveraging Pythia's positions beyond any reasonable risk management. He expanded the algorithm's reach across more of Meridian's portfolio. He gave interviews to financial magazines about his innovative approach to automated trading. Every single decision made the eventual collapse more spectacular. Then, there's the documentation angle most people never consider. While Hartwell was busy taking credit publicly, I was quietly gathering proof of everything. Email threads about Pythia's development, code repositories with timestamps showing my authorship, meeting records where I'd proposed specific strategies that later appeared in his interviews as his own ideas. Insurance, you might call it. The kind that ensures when everything falls apart, the blame lands exactly where it belongs. But here's what made this whole thing truly elegant. I wasn't just destroying Hartwell's reputation. I was transferring his success to myself. Every client meeting I had for Cassandra Capital built relationships with investors who would soon learn the truth about who really created Meridian's winning strategy. By the time I was ready to trigger the final sequence, several of Meridian's biggest clients had already expressed interest in moving their accounts to my new firm. They just didn't know it yet. The climax arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. Perfect timing, really. Markets were stable. Hartwell was at his most confident, and Pythia's hidden protocols were primed for simultaneous activation across dozens of positions. All it took was one click. The same click I'd been thinking about for months, ever since that moment in Hartwell's office when he called me just a numbers guy. Amazing how a single keystroke can transform millions in profits into an exponential hemorrhage of losses that appear completely natural, like market volatility rather than calculated revenge. What happened next would teach everyone the difference between creating strategy and understanding the mathematics that make strategy actually work. I watched Pythia's hidden protocols activate across 67 positions simultaneously. The cascade began exactly as I'd programmed it months earlier. Positions that had generated steady profits for 2 years suddenly reversed course with mathematical precision. What appeared to be random market volatility was actually the most calculated destruction in Meridian Capital's history. The beauty was in how natural it looked. No suspicious spikes, no obvious manipulation patterns. Just a perfectly orchestrated series of losses that any investigator would attribute to market forces. Hartwell's beloved algorithm was eating itself alive, and he had no idea why. By noon, Meridian had lost $12 million. By market close, the number hit $28 million. Hartwell's panicked calls to my office went unanswered. I was already 3 blocks away, walking into my resignation letter directly to HR. The letter was a masterpiece of professional courtesy. I thanked Hartwell for the opportunity to contribute to his vision. I wished him luck with his proprietary trading system. Then I formally withdrew all intellectual property contributions I'd made to the firm, effective immediately. The timing was flawless. My letter arrived in his inbox exactly 17 minutes before the final wave of losses hit. Within a week, Meridian Capital was hemorrhaging clients faster than Hartwell could empty a bottle. The SEC launched an investigation into their algorithmic trading practices. Reporters who'd interviewed Hartwell about his innovative strategies were now asking much harder questions about who actually built the system. Turns out, when you claim to be a genius, people expect you to explain how your genius works. Meanwhile, Cassandra Capital was accepting new clients daily. Funny how quickly investors move when they discover who really created their profits. The documentation I'd carefully preserved made ownership crystal clear. Every email, every code repository, every strategic decision that Hartwell had claimed as his own. 3 months later, I sat in my new office overlooking the city, watching a news report about Hartwell's bankruptcy filing. The man who'd called me just a numbers guy was now explaining to federal investigators why he couldn't actually explain how his revolutionary algorithm functioned. My new algorithm was running beautifully, same mathematical elegance as Pythia, but with one crucial difference. This time, only I controlled the switches. Sometimes the house wins not because of luck, but because someone finally bothered to count the cards properly.